5-star recruits, August 1st, the house settlement, and a whole lot of golf. Looks like there's a new king in the state of Alabama. Stick around. Let's talk about it. This is way offsides.
3, 2, let's go.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever the case may be. Welcome into Way Offsides, where the show's made up and nothing matters. I'm just kidding. This is your favorite Alabama sports talk show where we talk all things related to Alabama, and sometimes that includes our little brother across the state, Auburn. We're going to talk about that a little bit today. There's been a lot made to do regarding recruiting and what is going on right now in the state of Alabama. Some fans are ecstatic, some are cautiously optimistic, some are pessimistic, and others are downright losing their marbles. Why, you might ask, Cotton? What's going on? Well, as most of you know, last season coming in, Nick Saban retired at a really weird time. It left Kalen DeBoer, when he came into Tuscaloosa, it left him in a really weird space trying to hold together a roster. A lot of kids like Caleb Downs didn't really give him an opportunity to, get to know him, show him who he is. And then recruiting started. As soon as the staff was in place, recruiting started. The big focal point from external fan bases not named Alabama was that Kalen DeBoer, not being from the SEC, would not be able to recruit in the SEC. Now, we've seen this for decades go on. The same coordinators, the same coaches kind of rotating all around the Southeastern Conference. Jeremy Pruitt's a great example. So they do that because those guys have built recruiting networks in the Southeast. Well, the thought process there was that Kalen DeBoer wouldn't be able to do that. He wouldn't be able to come in and create a network quick enough to impact recruiting in enough time to save Alabama football from the retirement of Nick Saban. Well, if you'll remember, we talked a lot about the staff that he was putting together and strategically what that looked like. This web of pipeline all the way across the country, not just in the Southeastern Conference, but also out on the West Coast. That West Coast pipeline, those connections paid off fantastic for Kalen DeBoer in his first inaugural recruiting class at Alabama, a prorated class, really, when you think about the time he had to put that thing together. Then he still finished with a top 3 class. That wasn't enough to convince everybody outside of Alabama's fan base that Kalen DeBoer could recruit and was going to do what he needed to do to keep Alabama at the level where they need to be. Well, fast forward to summer of 2025, official visits are happening, and Alabama is absolutely on a tear right now. It's the same names: Ohio State, Oregon, Georgia, Alabama. The same teams that are always recruiting well in the summer and in the second half of the recruiting cycle are heating up again. It's the nature of the beast. Everything works on a curve. This is how it happens every year. And folks are panicking because Alabama was quiet for a while on the recruiting trail. They got that first commitment from Zion Gibson back in December. And then moving forward, there wasn't a lot of movement. But then out of nowhere, Bama tacks on 4 or 5 5-stars, depending on which recruiting agency you're looking at, seemingly out of nowhere. And now those same people who were saying Kalen DeBoer couldn't recruit are having to move the goalpost. Nick Kelly, our good friend, we've had him on the show several times, put out an article this morning, and he actually spoke to some people about the whole Nick Saban recruiting tactic and what that looked like, how often that happens. And just to summarize that article, I definitely go read it. I don't want to take away from the article so that you don't read it. Definitely, when you're done here, go read the dang thing. It's good. Nick Saban showing up on campus during that last weekend of official visits was a one-time thing. This was a outlier. I believe that there was some necessity there because of Kalen DeBoer and the staff being over in Tupelo with Keelan Russell at a funeral. As well, I think that, Alabama understood where they were in terms of having Tank Jones, Ezavier, Crowell, Cederian Morgan all on campus. And they need to make a statement. The statement being that although they lost the state of Alabama in the 2025 cycle because, again, Kalen DeBoer came in late, they didn't have time to really develop the relationships with these kids. And if you listen to the 2026 recruits, you ask them, which we have, Ezavier Griffin, Jet Tamala, you ask them what really stands out about Alabama. It's the relationships. It's the relationships that they have with the staff and these players. Ezavier Griffin's mom, Jay Clay, she talked a lot about Coach C-Rob and Coach Roach, the relationship that she has with those individuals who are recruiting her son. So Alabama didn't have time to develop those relationships in the 2025 cycle. Well, they've had a year now. And they're bringing Nick Saban as a closer that last official visit weekend. Nick Kelly specifically said not as a closer. But, I mean, honestly, yes, I think he was primarily there because the staff was attending the funeral of Keelan Russell's sister. But I also think that Nick Saban likely would have been there anyway. So, but either way, the thing is when you're recruiting, you use the tools that are available to you. And if any other program in the country had a Nick Saban on staff, they would absolutely be using that said Nick Saban to help recruit. They use Texas uses Lambos. Alabama uses Nick Saban. So Alabama comes out of official visit weekend. First week of July passes. We told you guys for weeks to be patient, that they were coming. And boom, Alabama skyrockets up the recruiting boards with several big-time commitments and in the mix for several more as we move to the fall. And the narrative is not matching up what everybody was saying. So now the focal point becomes, well, they're having to use Nick Saban. Well, that's just an argument born out of jealousy because you don't have a Nick Saban to use. Well, now it is turned into, well, Alabama's promising money that to athletes that they don't have, and that when August 1st rolls around, they're going to do this and that. This is going to change. That's going to change. All because Hugh Freeze has been playing golf all summer. And Hugh Freeze and the AD over at Auburn have come out and said, well, this is what we think is going to happen. This is our interpretation of the rules. And here's what we think is going to take place. Right, wrong, or indifferent, it's a hard look for Auburn fans when you're watching Georgia and Alabama, two of your biggest rivals, recruiting so well. And you're sitting there and you pick up a 3-star linebacker. And a long snapper. And that's it. That's been it. That's been the only movement you've had all summer. Obviously, I want to start here. Obviously, Hugh Freeze is a good recruiter. He was at Ole Miss despite what he was doing to recruit. He's been a good recruiter so far at Auburn. But if you really peel back the layers of the onion and look at what he was doing to recruit, Ole Miss was unethical at best. That's putting it very, very lightly. So he had success there based on unethical practice. He was fired for it. And then last year, you can kind of explain that recruiting class because he didn't have the Alabama competition in state that he usually has. So he locked up a lot of those guys. If Nick Saban's retirement would have happened the year before, you have to ask, would a lot of those in-state guys ended up at Auburn as opposed to Alabama? And if we're being honest, Auburn couldn't keep some of the bigger names, Naeem Offord, in state either last season. So when you look at it now, you've got, the top 3 guys in Alabama, Anthony Jones, Cederian Morgan, Ezavier Crowell. 2 out of 3 of them are now verbally committed to Alabama. I think personally, all 3 of them will end up verbally committed to Alabama. I know A&M and Oregon are going to make a late push on Tank Jones just because guys like said are committed to Alabama. I know that communication channel is still open with Florida. And so it doesn't mean he's going to flip, but, we'll follow the visits in the fall when the season starts and recruits start going on campuses. Alabama has been pretty public that they want to get Tristan Keys on campus in the fall. We'll see what that looks like. But what I need a lot of people to understand first is that the Pete Nakos tweet, I don't think that was about Alabama. The guys that Auburn fans are talking about are kids that grew up Alabama fans. Now, that doesn't mean something all the time. Clint Lamb said this over on the Sharpshooter show a couple nights ago. That doesn't always mean anything. We saw that with Ty Haywood last year. But you can, looking at it factually, you can understand why a guy like Cederian Morgan would want to play at Alabama. He grew up in the state. Alabama's everything he's known, right? He's an Alabama fan. So maybe he's willing to take less money to go play at Alabama. Or maybe Alabama met his offer. I don't know. Either way, what I'm saying is that the idea of these kids wanting to play for Alabama isn't as far-fetched as Auburn fans, Tennessee fans would want you to believe, because it's still Alabama. And the Alabama that these kids grew up with was winning national championships and beating the hell out of people any given Saturday in the fall. And they still see Alabama that way. Now, what you have to do if you're Kalen DeBoer and company is you have to continue a fragment of that success. He's not going to be Nick Saban. He's not going to win 6 national titles, especially in today's game. It's harder to win a national title than it ever has been. But if he can win a title or two, then all of a sudden that Bama dynasty, it still has a foundation that this generation of recruit is going to watch. And when it comes their time, they go, Bama's still that brand. They're still that historic traditional brand that I want to go play for. Not to mention that it's funny because last season it was, well, Alabama must not have the NIL money. They're not going to be able to keep up. And now the goalposts have been moved to where they're overpaying everybody. So they're promising money they don't have and this and that. First of all, I have a very hard time believing that Greg Byrne and the attorneys that are probably being conferred with in this would allow that to happen. Courtney Morgan, who is behind a lot of these deals, has done this at Michigan, at Washington. Never heard any bad press about a deal going south at either one of those places. Or even last season with Alabama. That's his job. And so I feel strongly and confidently that Alabama is likely going about this the right way. I think Nakos' tweet was more geared towards USC. I think Michigan was part of that conversation. I think Texas Tech, some other schools were part of that conversation. A lot. I think the majority of them were out in the Big 12, to be honest with you. But either way, it's not to say that it's not going to happen in the SEC. I mean, but the problem is these coaches understand in the long run that if they make a promise and then have to back away from that dollar amount, it hurts their credibility. They understand that these recruits, their families, they are all part of a big social circle and they talk. This is something that a lot of fans don't realize. Ezavier Griffin has been going to camps the past 3 or 4 years with, Tyler Atkinson, right? Ezavier Griffin commits to Alabama. Atkinson goes to Georgia. Well, guess what, man? They have a relationship, a friendship, a professional relationship even, and they still communicate. So if Griffin gets shorthanded his cash that he was promised, assuming he was promised anything at Alabama, he's going to talk to people about it. They're not, look, these guys aren't dumb. Greg Byrne has been masterfully handling the evolution of college football and what's going on very, very well. Not just college football, college sports as well. He's done it. Look at Alabama basketball. He's kept Alabama. He's helped build Alabama basketball up, and he's kept it extremely relevant. In a day at a school where most of the resources go towards football, that's their cash cow. So in the state of Alabama, as long as Auburn is not winning national championships, Alabama's always going to win that state in recruiting. Last year you had to throw it out. It was an outlier. You had to throw it out. Kalen DeBoer got there in February? Maybe late January. And then, he had a few months to put his staff together and start recruiting these guys that Nick Saban was recruiting. No. I mean, you can move the goalpost all you want. The fact of the matter is that Alabama is the king in the state of Alabama. And they're going to remain the king in the state of Alabama. And the quicker you can digest that, the quicker you can chew that up and swallow it, the more fun you'll have watching your team lose to Alabama. Hey, we got a lot of recruiting news coming up. We got some really cool live guests coming up tonight. We'll have Cruz, Oxenrider, the famed Twitter troll, on the show tonight live at 8 p.m. Central Time. Be sure you're there. Hey, Cotton, how can I keep track of all of this? There's so much news, there's shorts, there's all these things. Well, it's really easy. If you subscribe and hit the notification bell, you won't miss a thing. Your phone will tell you anytime we post. And you can watch it immediately and you can share it all over the place. Because the more we grow, the more we know. Or the more we know, the more we grow. I don't know, I made that up. Thanks for sticking around. You guys are the best. We love you as always. Please read your Bible, say your prayers, horns down, beat Auburn and LSU and Tennessee too. August 1st, there'll be football that month. That's all that's going to happen. Roll Tide.